So, hey everyone, I'm really glad to have a very special person with us today, and we're going to talk about again a very influential industry, and again a industry that has been like a source of interest for so many students, and like this is a largely an industry that many people want to get into, and that's finance. And today we have, and I'm also glad to say that he's one of our almanacs of our CVS college, and he has been a part of such great firms, doing internships in great firms, and then moving on to have a really bright and successful career in a company like EY, and then moving on to Grant Thornton and stuff like that. So now let's and so the very special person with us today is Mr. Adarsh Shatri, and we're going to talk about in general what the finance field entails, and how the entire how his entire journey as an investment banker first at EY has been, and how he has moved on in his career. So sir, like my first question would be, how did the journey for investment banking, or like in general the finance field start? Like, was it always the goal to get into finance, or somehow your career transitioned into it over time?
So starting off, in the initial during my college years, I had no clue about investment banking, private equity. But during our third year is the time where I got the exposure to investment banking transactions, where did my internship in Deloitte, and that is where my interest started. And I think it's already 6.5 years that I've been in the field.
Yeah. So then moving on, like investment banking, obviously by the name it sounds very complicated to students. Like you said, even when you were in college, it's difficult to grasp what the entire concept is. So like as an entry level, when people get into finance or people get into investment banking, if you have to explain it simple words so people can understand that when you enter into investment banking, or however you transition into investment banking, like what's the job environment for an investment banker at the entry level, especially?
At the entry level, it's mostly got to do with a lot of research, with a lot of financials, and a lot of understanding about very basic stuff about the company, like revenue, EBITDA, balance sheet, working capital, and stuff like that. But overall, it's more like a product selling job, right? You just have to sell a company, you just have to make a pitch, you just have to do a lot of thought process behind the structure and what sort of an outcome do you want. So it's more of a product role, but in a technical term.
Yeah. So like being good with numbers is obviously an prerequisite, but overall you would say that being good with people and dealing with people.
People skills plus your negotiations are the key. More than the number, it's more of a negotiation game.
Yeah. So, but then obviously, then let's come to education qualifications, like degrees such as MBAs or CFAs. Do you think they help, or are they like a necessity to get into finance in general, or like there are ways that people could probably get into it?
I mean, I have seen people without CA, CFA, MBA and excelling in investment banking, and I have seen people having all the 3 degrees and still failing to do or deliver at meaningful times. It's got more to do with understanding very basic things. It's not a rocket science. But in terms of qualification, I would say MBA and CFAs would be preferred.
So like back then, I think how was your, like since we are from the same college, so how was your experience with the placements? Like how was the environment for placements itself, or were you or like of course an extended question for it, like for me, like the students of my generation are pretty confused about whether they should go for a placement or rather they should continue their studies, go for MBA or CFA or any sort of certifications to actually like then go into a better job, better opportunity. So anything on that what sort of mindset should be there, especially obviously during third years when you have to make this choice and it's very important.
Yeah, I think during our time also it was the same, because I also got placed in EY through my college. But at the very end moment, I dropped it because I wanted to pursue my MBA, because I thought that I am getting a placement, but I'm not getting a placement that I want to be in. So it's more of a personal choice. Ki, do you want to do a job right now and take sort of independent, and I think it's more of a personal choice. For me, I think I prefer doing my MBA over my job, and that was just because I was not getting the right fit where I wanted to be.
Yeah. So moving on, like obviously being an investment banker and especially being in finance field in general, it requires a lot of time devotion, right? Since it requires research and then you have to create pitches like you explained to us. So obviously then it becomes sort of hectic over time. And how do you like cope up with the work-life balance? Because I think it's especially important in the finance field, seeing that obviously dealing with money and dealing with those kinds of numbers that an investment banker deals with, it can lead to a major cause of sort of a disbalance in your life or cause of stress. So how do you cope up with that?
I think it's got more to do with what job you're doing and how much you like it. I mean, if you like doing a job, you can maybe do it for 20 hours, 24 hours a day. So, for example, if a doctor, he's doing his job, he's working for 15 hours, 16 hours, just because he's liking the job. So, I think it's got more to do with what you do, and if you love doing that, I don't think it's a challenge.
Yeah. So one more question, and this is like a personal question as well. Seeing that so many potential workforce like the youth itself is excited or like enthusiastic about getting into the finance field. Do you think that over time, since this enthusiasm has been there for like a past so many years, do you think like somehow the finance field itself entirely has become sort of saturated, or are there still provisions or still scope for growth in the field itself? Or maybe it's time to switch to some other sort of interest or people, some closely related interest maybe. But overall, what's the state of the finance industry in terms of job market?
I think finance as a market is a very big market, right? And I would have more knowledge about the services part, mainly advisory, transaction advisory, and things like that. And talking about this particular subsector, which is the advisory, I think there's a big scope, because right now, if you look at India, we would be in terms of stock market action, in terms of IPOs, banking deals, we would not be in the top 10 also in the world, right? So there's a lot of scope, and as far as we are growing, so there are going to be a lot of mergers, acquisition, fundings, and everything. So I think that there's a lot of scope, and the job market is always there. And I think investment banking is a field where jobs are always there, and this is one field that I don't think that automation, AI, and things like that are going to change much, because it's more of a people negotiation and live sort of deals that just happen in the moment, and not predictable moments, like you can't predict that this deal will happen at this rate or X, Y, Z. So I think the job market is there.
Talking about AI, I do think that it most likely would take away from the jobs in the finance market. But what do you think it can add to the finance market? Maybe some degree of automation. Because imagining from a person who is not in the finance sector, right, and who absolutely has no knowledge of finance sector, right, being still a student, it does sound like automation or integrating AI into the finance field itself is a difficult task. So like, is there work going on in the industry itself, or like how do you personally think that AI could add to the finance field or the sector?
I mean, long before AI, we had algorithms also that came in, like maybe 7-8 years ago, to the Indian market per se, and automation will only help. I mean, it's not going to take away jobs per se in the services market. But if you talk about the overall, let's say, brokerage market, or any other typical finance, which is a non-facing sort of a role, so that may be affected by the automation to some extent. But client-facing roles are not going to get affected, because finance is something that trust is built upon only on the face value. So that is there.
Yeah, very true. Just last question. Being obviously as a like investment banker, it's important that you keep an eye on the markets. That's like the core part of the entire thing, right? But in the recent years, geopolitical strains are like really high at an all-time high. And while India obviously does maintain a neutrality in those ways, anything that you've observed in, especially in the kind of clients that you work with, or like the kind of jobs that you work with, or the projects that you work on, anything that you've experienced that has been affected by the geopolitical strains or the general trend in Indian markets?
Yeah, to some extent that is true, because clients, particularly in the oil and gas industry per se, were largely affected because of Russian conflict. Then there was some tech companies which had bases in Israel and the Middle East, they were affected because of the Israel conflict. So yeah, in the overall scheme of things, it does affect, but I would not say that it's a very large chunk of effect that is happening. It's more of a domestic consumption that's going to lead the growth in India, I guess.
Yeah. So I guess that's it. And thanks a lot. Like it was such a great experience talking to you, and especially like from my perspective, being as a finance enthusiast myself, and hoping to get into the same industry. It's really nice to hear insights about and how do you analyze insights, especially like geopolitical strains it may be or AI itself. So your attitude towards everything being how positive it is, it's like really nice to see because it's very easy for us students or like the youth to get into a vicious cycle of thinking that okay probably we're not gonna get jobs. So I think it just goes to show that as long as you're doing your hard work, doing you're paying your dues. So I think you'll still get into it and achieve. Thank you so much, sir. It was such a great experience talking to you.
Thank you.